Once upon a time, a sweet little girl named Little Red Riding Hood lived in a peaceful village beside a magical forest. Everyone loved her bright red hood and kind heart. One beautiful morning, Mother baked fresh bread and packed apples, grapes, sweet honey, and treats into a basket. She smiled and handed it to Little Red Riding Hood. Mother gently said, "Please take this basket to Grandma, stay on the forest path, and never talk to strangers." Little Red Riding Hood smiled and promised to be careful. Little Red Riding Hood waved goodbye and happily skipped into the enchanted forest. Birds sang cheerful songs while colorful butterflies danced around blooming flowers. She smiled as she admired the tall green trees, sparkling streams, and beautiful flowers. Friendly rabbits and birds made the magical forest feel peaceful and full of wonder. Suddenly, a large gray wolf stepped out from behind a tree. He smiled politely and greeted Little Red Riding Hood with a calm and friendly voice. The wolf asked where she was going. Trusting him, Little Red Riding Hood happily said she was taking delicious food to visit her grandmother deep inside the forest. The clever wolf pointed toward a meadow filled with colorful flowers. "Your grandmother would love," he said. Little Red Riding Hood smiled and began picking beautiful flowers. While Little Red Riding Hood picked flowers, the clever wolf quietly raced through the forest. He wanted to reach grandmother's cozy cottage before she arrived. Grandmother sat peacefully beside her warm fireplace, reading her favorite storybook. Suddenly, she heard a gentle knock at the front door and looked up with curiosity. "Who is there?" Grandmother asked gently. The clever wolf answered in a soft voice, pretending to be Little Red Riding Hood. Grandmother slowly opened the front door. The sneaky wolf hurried inside the cozy cottage. Grandmother quickly hid safely inside a large wooden wardrobe, while the wolf looked around with a clever smile. The wolf put on grandmother's nightgown, sleeping cap, and glasses. Then he climbed into her bed, waiting quietly for Little Red Riding Hood to arrive. A little later, Little Red Riding Hood reached grandmother's cottage with her basket and beautiful flowers. She smiled happily as she walked to the front door. Little Red Riding Hood knocked gently on the wooden door. "Come in, my dear," called the wolf, pretending to sound exactly like grandmother. Little Red Riding Hood stepped inside the cozy cottage. Everything looked normal, but something about grandmother seemed very strange. She looked closer with curious eyes. "Grandmother," she asked softly, "what big ears you have." The wolf smiled and answered, "All the better to hear you, my dear." Little Red Riding Hood looked even closer. "Grandmother, what big eyes you have." The wolf smiled again and replied, "All the better to see you." Then she noticed the wolf's big hands and shiny teeth. Little Red Riding Hood became worried as she slowly stepped backward, realizing something was very wrong. Just then, a brave forest ranger heard strange sounds from outside the cottage. He quickly opened the door and rushed inside to help Little Red Riding Hood. The frightened wolf jumped out of the bed and ran toward the open door. He rushed into the forest as fast as he could and disappeared among the tall trees. Grandmother came safely out of the wooden wardrobe with a warm smile. Little Red Riding Hood hugged her tightly, happy that her grandmother was safe again. Grandmother thanked the brave forest ranger for arriving just in time. The ranger smiled kindly and said, "I'm always happy to help keep everyone safe." Little Red Riding Hood opened her basket and placed the fresh bread, sweet honey, juicy apples, grapes, and beautiful flowers on grandmother's table with love. Grandmother smiled with joy as they shared a delicious meal together. They laughed, talked, and enjoyed spending time with one another in the cozy cottage. As the sun began to set, Little Red Riding Hood hugged grandmother goodbye. She thanked the forest ranger and promised to visit grandma again very soon. Little Red Riding Hood walked home along the safe forest path. This time she stayed on the trail and remembered every word of her mother's wise advice. When she arrived home, Mother gave her a big, loving hug. She was happy to see Little Red Riding Hood safe after her journey through the forest. Little Red Riding Hood told Mother everything that had happened. Mother listened carefully and smiled proudly, because her daughter had learned an important lesson. From that day on, Little Red Riding Hood always stayed on the safe path and remembered that listening to wise advice helps keep us safe every day. The next morning, Little Red Riding Hood woke up with a happy smile. The bright sun shone through her window, and birds sang cheerful songs outside her cottage. Mother and Little Red Riding Hood baked fresh bread together. They laughed, mixed the dough, and filled the warm kitchen with the wonderful smell of homemade bread. Little Red Riding Hood carefully packed fresh bread, sweet honey, juicy apples, grapes, and colorful flowers into her basket. She smiled, ready to visit grandmother again. She walked happily along the safe forest path. Beautiful butterflies fluttered around her while birds sang sweet songs high in the tall green trees. 5 friendly rabbits, squirrels, and colorful birds greeted Little Red Riding Hood along the way. She waved with a smile, but remembered to stay safely on the path. Grandmother happily opened her cottage door and gave Little Red Riding Hood a warm hug. She was delighted to see her granddaughter safely arrive once again. Together, they enjoyed fresh bread, fruit, and honey while sharing happy stories. Their laughter filled the cozy cottage with love, kindness, and warm family memories. As the golden sun began to set, Little Red Riding Hood said goodbye and started her journey home through the peaceful, enchanted forest with a joyful heart. Walking home, Little Red Riding Hood remembered everything she had learned. She smiled proudly, knowing that listening to good advice always keeps her safe. Mother welcomed Little Red Riding Hood home with a warm hug. Together, they thanked God for a wonderful day and looked forward to many more happy adventures together. The next day, Little Red Riding Hood happily walked through the beautiful forest once again. She stayed on the safe path and enjoyed the peaceful sounds of nature. Birds sang from the trees, butterflies danced among the flowers, and little rabbits hopped beside the path. Little Red Riding Hood smiled at every wonderful sight around her. Soon she reached Grandmother's cottage with her basket full of fresh bread, sweet honey, juicy apples, grapes, and beautiful, colorful flowers picked along the way. Grandmother welcomed her with a warm hug and a joyful smile. They spent the afternoon talking, laughing, and sharing delicious food together in the cozy cottage. After their meal, Grandmother thanked Little Red Riding Hood for always being kind, thoughtful, and helpful. Little Red smiled proudly and gave Grandma another loving hug. As evening arrived, Little Red Riding Hood began walking home. The golden sunset painted the sky while the magical forest glowed with warm, peaceful colors. Mother welcomed Little Red Riding Hood home with a big hug. She was proud that her daughter had become wiser, kinder, and more careful on every journey. Little Red Riding Hood promised she would always listen to good advice, stay on the safe path, and make wise choices wherever she went. The whole village celebrated with smiles, laughter, and happiness. Everyone was thankful that Little Red Riding Hood and Grandmother were safe and together again. And so, Little Red Riding Hood lived happily with her loving family, always remembering that kindness, courage, and listening to wise advice lead to the happiest endings.